and their bleached bones tell unflagging onward march from old Mannar through Kurunagala and Tamil Matale to time-known Kandy's land. Kandy was the word for India, for Ceylon, as far as these people were concerned, where the virgin jungle shrieked under woodman's axe. There amidst her contours, the coffee trees gleamed, the coffee beads beamed. Beyond unsealed mountains, ere the rail tracks came, the macadamed road, buildings and bridges rose, over the leopard's lair. The tavala and stagecoach, the postman with bell spear, brought state to estate, brought city to hamlet, and so began to shape England's Eden, the planter's Raj, for over 100 years to the tom-tom's throb. So this is really the way it all started. And there they go, these bronze-bodied men, as he calls them, to the rhythm of pickaxe, mammootty, fork and crowbar, forkers and pruners, furners and sprayers, each skilled in the task, they enter the field, 8 hours in a day, 7 times in a week. Thus their lifeblood flows to fashion this land a paradise for some. And Velupillai also describes the line houses. He talks about, here is but a row of tin-roofed lines, the very warehouse where serfdom thrives. With a scant space of 10 by 12, there is the hearth, home drenched in soot and smoke, to eat and sleep, to incubate and breed, to meet the master's greed. So I knew Velupillai when I was in Sri Lanka. He died a few years ago. He was already quite old when I knew him, but he stood out to me as somebody who really felt about the plight of these people. And I can see that Mr. A.V. Pai, during his years in Ceylon, understood really the crux of the problem. And as you mentioned, Hiranmaya, he approached it, I think, in this very gentle, understated manner, but in a very effective way. I think made an impression not only on people of the plantations, but also on the larger Ceylonese population, as I could read from the numerous encomiums that came his way when he left Ceylon at the end of his stay there. It's absolutely, for me, it was so fascinating to go through this account and to understand how the problem had, in a sense, begun in the early part of the 20th century in terms of this desire for excluding the Indian influence from Sri Lanka. Today, of course, the problem is very different, I think. Today, the Indian Tamil problem in Sri Lanka doesn't exist the way it did at the time your father was there or at the time I was. And at the High Commission, both when I was there earlier and in my later assignment, we tried to do a lot in terms of estate workers' education. Like your trust, we had set up a Ceylon Estate Workers Education Trust, which provided scholarships and especially the brighter kids were given opportunity to come out to Colombo, study in good schools, attend college. Some of them even came to India, to some of our technical schools. And the India-Sri Lanka Foundation, which we collectively, both the Sri Lankans and we, ran together, also provided a lot of funding for projects, including teacher training. There's a huge problem about untrained teachers in the estate schools. They don't have enough trained teachers. The children go to school and they don't get the instruction that they deserve. The facilities are very poor. So this problem hasn't really gone away, except that now they have an identity. They are Sri Lankan. So when we talk today of the Tamil population of Sri Lanka, we don't distinguish between plantation Tamils and Jaffna Tamils or Batikalo Tamils. They're all Tamils. And the problem concerning the minority population of Sri Lanka, as you know, is a very real one. The question of what the future will hold for them, whether they will have a true voice in the affairs of that country, to what extent authority and responsibility can be devolved to areas of the country with concentrations of minority population. while at the same time keeping the country united and one, which of course is something that India has always stressed. But that doesn't deflect from the need, I believe, to assure the Tamil population of that country a better future and more confidence about being Sri Lankan. I think that problem continues. The war is over, but that battle hasn't really been won. And I'd like to conclude by, that is somehow drained in terms of its creative energies, I think. And there is so much scarring from those years that it's not going to be easy to manage these issues that I referred to. But, and let me first refer to what Gandhiji said. It's important that, there's a lot of noise and a lot of, recrimination that, in a sense, clogs the airwaves between the two countries when it comes to whether it's fishermen who are arrested, or whether it's the issue of Kachetivu, or whether it's the issue of Sri Lankan army personnel being trained in India. There's so much of that blood that is witnessed on such occasions. But what I think Gandhiji said is very, very relevant even today. What he said was, it should be impossible for India and Ceylon to quarrel. We are the nearest neighbors, and I love that phrase, nearest neighbors. I think we are nearest neighbors. There's no escaping that. We are inheritors of a common culture. But even as blood brothers sometimes differ, so do next door neighbors. And like brothers, they usually adjust their differences and are often more closely knit together after the clearance. And this is what he said almost 70 years ago. He went to Ceylon, as you know, in November 1927, and went to Jaffna, and went to Colombo, and spent a few weeks there. But at this moment, I think these words have particular relevance. And what Jawaharlal Nehru said, and I'll refer to that also, we must not lose perspective. Ceylon is a little island at the tip of India. Culturally and historically, it is almost a part of India. The Sinhalese look up at India as their holy land because of the Buddha, but they are a little afraid of this great, big giant of a country overlooking them. And fear always leads to wrong action. If we try to threaten them, we only increase their fear. Therefore, I have avoided speaking the language of threats and have tried to be friendly to them even when they have acted in an improper way. We have to be firm, of course, and not give up any basic rights we claim. And then on another occasion, he says this, it seems to me quite inevitable and right that there should be the closest relationship and cooperation between India and Lanka. Geography compels it. Our history and common culture make it inevitable. And I think that is what inspired Mr. Pai also in his work and in his years in Sri Lanka. That comes through very nicely in your book. And most of all, I think it's a wonderful tribute of a daughter to her father. And being a daughter myself, and having lost my father last year, I can relate to this very, very entirely and very closely when I can see your desire to keep alive the memory of your father and such a distinguished civil servant who went on after his years in Ceylon to serve independent India. Very often the Indian civil service, questions were raised about they having served the Raj and then gone on to serve independent India. I think Mr. Nehru himself said there's nothing civil about the Indian civil service. But of course he was also very kind in his latter comments about the work they did. But I came across this anecdote. Mr. R.K. Nehru, who went on to become ambassador to China and ambassador to Egypt, he was also an ICS recruit. And when he appeared before the ICS interview board, I think it was in 1924 or 1925, they asked him, you're related to the Nehru family, most of them are in prison, and how are you going to, join the civil service and serve the government? And his answer, apparently, which got him top marks in the interview, was that, we have to prepare for the time we are independent. So some of us are going to enter government service in order to be prepared. And I think they were wonderfully prepared to serve independent India. Generation civil service officers and aspirants, I think, to government service should read this book, because it's a wonderful record, a wonderful testimony to the kind of service that people like Mr. Pai rendered to the cause of our nation. Thank you.
Everybody look. Thank you. Thank you, Lakshmi, very much. It's very special day for me, and I'm going to try not to wallow too much in nostalgia. But it's exactly 25 years since my father passed away, and I think I should have done this much earlier, because it's based on some letters of his that I discovered while cleaning out the house a few years after he died. It's wonderful that our family kept letters. They wrote letters, they kept letters. I have bundles of letters, diaries from grandfathers. And when I started reading, there was a whole new aspect of what life was like. And Ceylon came alive again. I have very, very beautiful memories of Sri Lanka. And I don't know how many of you have been there, but it's a very, very beautiful country. As a poet once said, it's a pendant on the necklace of the coastline of India. If Ceylon wasn't there, it would be a very empty space in that ocean. As my father said, there was so much we had in common that all the animosity, all the anti-Indian, anti-Tamil sentiment that he had to face when he was in Sri Lanka, throughout he kept saying, but we share a common culture, we share so much. When one goes to Sri Lanka and sees all the Buddhist memorials, it's just wonderful. History comes alive when you go there. But the other side of it, as Nirupama has said, is the condition of the plantation tunnels, which for all these years, I don't think it's improved very much. Yes, they are citizens, but they are still plantation labor. They still live in lines. And one of the things that I felt in writing this book is the resentment that all displaced people feel when they're moved to a country, when they run away and try to find some kind of space where they can live in peace. The Sri Lankan tunnels, after the Ceylon agreement, 1.5 million of them were sent back to India. And I don't know if anybody's ever reported what happened to them. I mean, you worked with them, but when I go to the Nilgiris, I have a niece who is married to a planter there, and they're full of resentment. And all these Ceylonese who come here and taken over our hills, they've become pawns in the Tamil Nadu politics. And yet, nobody has actually seen the human dimension to it. I think that is what I felt about my father, is that he was a humanist, and whatever